Welcome to the Dr. Tom Show. It's great to have you join us today. First episode of 2021, and what an episode it's going to be for you today. Really excited to have Dr. Brett Hill joining us on the show. He's the host of some of Australia's top health podcasts, a resilience mentor, a functional nutrition coach, as well as a chiropractor, and an author of the amazing book, How to Eat an Elephant. He appears regularly on TV and radio. He likes to help people live long, healthy, and happy lives. But more importantly, I feel, create a healthy environment for his family and their future. His latest book is called Rock Bottom. We're going to be talking about bouncing back and resilience on the show today. Dr. Brett, thank you very much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, mate, and thanks for that wonderful introduction.
Such a pleasure, and it's well deserved. And with all of that, I'm excited to get into your brain and find out what's going on. But first of all, tell me, what is resilience?
Well, it's a great question because it's something we talk about a lot and we often don't always define exactly what we mean. And I think the definition sometimes is a little bit limited. So often when we talk about resilience, we'll think about mental resilience and particularly our ability to survive through adverse circumstances or challenges. But I think we should expand upon that because I think so often we just focus on surviving through challenges when really what we'd like to be doing is thriving through challenges, and that's a totally different perspective and a totally different outcome. And not only that, I think often when we do talk about resilience, we do just focus on that mental aspect of it, when really I think we should be broadening that to include our physical body, include our relationships, our finances, all of those other aspects that make us resilient. I think more and more we learn that all of those interplay very strongly with each other. And that if we're not resilient, if we're not focusing on all of those areas, then eventually one of them is going to catch up with us. And I think a lot of people have seen that in the last 12 months or so, where there's been a lot of challenges, there's been a lot of uncertainty, and challenges have been catching up with people where perhaps they weren't as resilient as they thought they were or they thought they could be. As we move into 2021, I think we're now realizing that 2021, as much as we sort of got to New Year's and thought, yay, we got 2020 out the way, this is going to be great. We're now sort of realizing that it's going to keep going into 2021 and be a little bit of a challenging year as well. And so it's a great time to focus on our resilience so that we can thrive through 2021. But also for a lot of people, I think they've now realized that they weren't as well prepared for 2020 as they thought they were. And that now they can start preparing themselves for whatever comes next and make sure that next time something happens, they're going to be in a more resilient position to, once again, not only survive it, but to really thrive through it as well.
I really like that. I like the fact that you're looking at it holistically and from a rounded approach, because people are just surviving at the moment, and thriving has to be all of those facets. And I suppose, with the world waking up maybe to health, they're thinking about what can I do to survive right now? And they're maybe going for a walk every day. I suppose that's what's happening in our country, but that's the only thing people have changed. Yep. And you're right, they might focus on this one area, but that's still in survival mode. And, to thrive with resilience, it sounds like what you're saying, it's a much bigger approach that we need to be taking.
Absolutely. And I think there's been a real divergence. People are seeing the different ways people have survived and thrived through this year and seeing that, some people are really battling in 2020 and 2021. It's been a huge challenge for them, whether that is physically, whether that's financially, whether that's mentally. And then they're looking and saying, well, hang on, some other people seemingly are doing better. They seem to be surviving and thriving through it. In fact, some people are having their best year ever. Some people are making squillions of dollars. Some people are in the best shape they've ever been in. Some people are, changing their diet. Some people are, rediscovering themselves, so there's been a lot of change happening. And people are looking at that now thinking, well, hang on, what's the difference? What's happening here? Why are some people doing better than others? And obviously, there's a lot that comes into that in terms of personal circumstances, in terms of socioeconomic factors and all sorts of different things that come into that. But ultimately, it is a bit of a wake-up call for us to realize what we can control and what we can do about it to get ourselves into a more resilient position now and into the future.
I like that. I like that you said that in terms of it, people are using it to the advantage, but something has to, switch. Something has to make us go, okay, now I do something differently. And your book is aptly named Rock Bottom because I assume it's that you're sunk to realize actually I need to start going back up. So tell us a little bit about how that came about and your story, and maybe how that can inspire other people.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's really kind of two ways that comes about. And I was probably a little bit of both. And so the one way that it comes about, which is probably slightly more, I think probably slightly more rare, is where people just come to it from almost more of a philosophical perspective. You know, they kind of learn this idea that, hey, there's something else out there. You know, for me, that came through mentors in the chiropractic community, sort of showing me, you know, doing talks, coming and doing presentations, saying, hey, you know, there's a different way of looking at the world, you know, that your body is more capable than you were led to believe. Your body is more resilient than you were led to believe. And if you just, you know, give it what it needs and none of what it doesn't, you know, physically, chemically, emotionally, then you can potentially get different outcomes here. And so I had that really sort of vitalistic understanding. But I also think in some ways I had that on a bit of a superficial level in terms of I understood all of it from a sort of mental level, from a theoretical level. But like many people, I think it wasn't until I really hit rock bottom that I decided to make some serious change. So, you know, I'd changed a lot of stuff in my life over a long period of time. I'd given a lot of advice over a long period of time. And I now look back on some of that and think that was a bit naive, you know. But for me, it was really getting divorced. So in 2013, I got divorced, and it was a massive wake-up call for me. It was a massive shock to me. I sort of didn't see it coming. I got blindsided a little bit, and it made me really reevaluate everything in my life. And it did really make me, it led to me hitting rock bottom. I often say it's not the divorce that caused me to hit rock bottom. It was what I did to myself as a result of the divorce that caused me to hit rock bottom, in that I kind of felt like I should have done better. You know, I'd done so much study. I knew so much stuff. I'd done so much personal development. I'd done so much research in the health world. You know, I'd done my podcast. I'd interviewed the best of the best kind of worldwide. And yet here I was finding myself in this position where everything I'd kind of hoped and dreamed for, you know, my goal had always been kind of the family, the 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, and the happy life to bring this family up in. And I really just felt like it had just been pulled out from under me. And I beat myself up really badly about that. And so as I said, for me, the rock bottom wasn't actually the divorce, but it was the flow on from the divorce of me really getting to a pretty dark place in terms of beating myself up about how I managed to get myself into that situation.
And it's quite interesting. It's a very male sort of, to be quite broad brushed, you know, it's so easy, especially when you've got a bit of knowledge, you look healthy, you're fit. Like, you know, some people who've been on the show have been at the top of their game in the health industry looking well, but on the inside they get very sick. And you kind of similar to that, you can bluff it for a while and then it hits you. And then the man approaches, I am going to fix this right now. And I like the fact that you're open about that, and that you're not just saying you just fixed it. You did some introspection. So tell me, what did you change? What was it, you know, in that searching of yourself? What was it that stuck out, and what did you start to change?
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing I did was exactly what you said. I took a very male approach to it, and I just wanted to fix everything, right? And so I was like, okay, what tools have I got in my toolkit that I can fix this with? You know, and I just got out all my biggest sledgehammers that I could find and started applying them to the problem, you know. And that was really what led me to that dark place, because I was coming from a position of kind of not loving myself, you know, perhaps not even liking myself, because I was just beating myself up for getting into this situation. And so as a result, I was just taking on board 100% of the blame for what had happened, and taking on 100% of the responsibility for what had happened, and really beating myself up about it. And so that was what got me to that rock bottom. And literally it was like that rock bottom was just getting to the point where I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. Like, I'm not sure what would have happened if I kept doing this. Like, it's not like I didn't get to the point where I contemplated like suicide. You know, I know a lot of people get to that point. I didn't get there. But I got to that point where I was like, if I don't change something here, something really bad is going to happen. And I never quite visualized what that was, but it was like the rock bottom was, I just cannot physically cope with going any lower, kind of thing, you know? And so I was like, I've got to change the way I'm approaching this. And for me, the first realization was that if I wasn't coming from a place of loving myself, then I was never going to be able to figure out a way to solve the problem. Like I was never going to be able to figure out what I really needed or what I really wanted or how to get, how to get my purpose back. Because one of the big things I really lost was my sense of purpose. And so, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. My goal had always been to, create this happy, healthy family, to create a healthy world for my family to grow up in. And that was really my motivation for everything that I did. And so then when I felt like this family had sort of been taken out from under me, I was like, well, why am I doing all this? Why am I doing my podcast? Why am I writing a book? Why have I got this chiropractic practice? Like, what's the point? It didn't get me what I wanted anyway, kind of thing. And so I'd lost that purpose. But it wasn't until I could actually get to the stage where I was really loving myself that I could actually then give myself permission to say what I wanted and to go after what I wanted. And so that was really the first step for me. And then the second step was rediscovering my purpose. And the irony of that is that my purpose didn't really change a whole lot. And so it was just my thinking around the purpose that changed. Like I literally had, and this sounds ridiculous, but I literally had this light bulb moment one day where I went, oh, you know what? I can still be a good dad, even though I've been divorced. But it was like there was something in my subconscious that told me that I was a failure as a dad because I've been divorced and that I was never going to be good enough and I was never going to, give my kids the life they deserve because I'd been divorced. But just that one, it was literally just like a light bulb, like a switch flicked, and I was like, oh, okay. And it's like, now I know what to do, and it was like on from there. And so it was that self-love was what enabled me to ask myself what I really wanted and to rediscover my purpose, which I think really everything else flowed on from.
I love that. It reminds me of a quote, Ayn Rand. She says, take care of me for you and take care of you for me.
Yeah.
And I think men miss that a lot. They try and take care of everybody else first. And it's like the man who built his house on the sand. It's just going to wash away. So there are a lot of people feeling like they hit rock bottom at the moment. You mentioned suicide there, but that's a serious problem at the moment. Like it's through the roof.
Absolutely.
So if someone's listening to this show and they're starting to feel like they're heading towards that rock bottom place, what's one thing that they can do to start, getting attuned to themselves, loving themselves, and what's something practical that someone could maybe try and lean into or do today?
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of answers to that. There's lots of ways you can try and reconnect with that self-love, but ultimately, I think it comes down to taking some sort of an action, some sort of an action to show yourself that you think you're worth it. And it's like this kind of like catch-22 thing. Like it's like you have to do the action to show yourself that you think you're worth it. But it's not actually the action that makes the difference. It's actually the thought process that creates the action of you saying, I'm like it's like this like snowball effect that kind of happens. And so one of the things that I did was, and I get embarrassed when I share this because it is kind of a little bit embarrassing. One of the things I did was I was in this place where I was, divorced. I was feeling sorry for myself. I was, lamenting the lost relationship. And so one of the things I did, I sat down, I actually wrote myself a list of all of the things that I was craving, like all of the things I was missing, And so all sorts of stuff on this list, from like physical touch and hugs to going to the movies, to going to dinner, to going out dancing, to, I don't know, there was bucket loads of stuff on this list. And so I wrote out this huge list of all the things that I was craving that I felt like I was missing out on. And then I put that on one side of a page. On the other side of the page, I wrote out all the ways I could give it to myself. And so it's kind of this idea that I had to fill up my own cup and fill up my own bucket. And also, I guess, partly predated on the idea that if ever I was going to get in a relationship again, I didn't want to be coming from this kind of desperately needy place that was going to create this horribly unbalanced relationship. I wanted to be a whole person seeking another whole person, And so I wrote this list and literally I was going to the movies by myself. I was like, let's go to the movies by myself. And it turns out going to the movies by yourself is fantastic. There's like nobody asking you about the plot line. There's nobody like, who's that guy? None of that. You just get to sit and watch it. It's brilliant. I went out dancing. I'd like literally, I wasn't even drinking at the time, but I'd go out to a nightclub by myself, dance totally by myself till 3 a.m. and just be like totally happy, blissed out, enjoying it. The most embarrassing one I did, and I always share it because it's embarrassing, and I know people relate to you when you embarrass yourself, but I bought myself like one of those massive bolster pillows. And so I would actually go to sleep at night, like cuddled up to this massive bolster pillow. And it was the best. It was so good. So that's what I did. I started doing things to show myself that I love myself. And in the process, started loving myself again.
That's so important, because we do often look to others to fill those holes, don't we? And
Yeah.
like you say, that
Especially after after a big breakup, especially after a big breakup.
so if people are starting to look towards those actions, and how can people monitor their blind spots? Because you talk about starting to love yourself. At the start of the show, you mentioned about different facets of our health: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Oftentimes we go, right, I'm going to make a change, I'm going to run
Yeah.
every day, but then we leave something behind. Have you got
Yeah.
any tips of how people can maybe monitor their blind spots so that they're not falling back into old
Yeah,
habits
yeah,
and such?
absolutely. I mean, your body has a wonderful built-in mechanism for identifying your blind spots, right? So every time one of your blind spots comes up, you get triggered. Okay, so every time someone says something that triggers you, every time something happens that triggers you, every time you see something on TV that triggers you, that's your blind spot, right? Like the reason that triggers you, the reason that riles you up is there's something within you that recognizes it, and that's where you need to go hunting. Like, what is it about that annoys me so much? Why does that trigger me? Why does that annoy me? There's something there that I need to figure out what that is.
It's like when I get told I shouldn't eat that bar of chocolate or that glass of wine. Makes me
Right?
angry, but I know
Like,
it's true.
yeah,
Um,
like I always say, if someone walks up to you on the street and goes like, "You're a green alien from Mars," you go, whatever, okay, no worries, and you walk on your way, right? Because it's like so obviously not true that it doesn't trigger you. It doesn't care. But when someone says something to you that's just got that little skerrick of truth, it's like, that one, yeah, that I felt that, that got me somewhere. What's that about? And that's the next step is curiosity. Is having that curiosity to say, what's that about? What's going on there? Why is that happening? How can I delve deeper into that? One of the things I did, the work I did was with a lady by the name of Byron Katie. She's wonderful. I don't know if you've heard her book, which is called Loving What Is. And she has a whole process of sort of doing that introspection called The Work. And you can get the book online. You get the audio book, which is even better. And you can also download these worksheets from her website that allow you to do the work. And they make a lot more sense if you've listened to the audio or read the book. But they actually allow you to kind of look at it. And she calls it the turnaround, which is like identifying these things that other people are doing that are just grating on you, and then identifying where and how you do the same thing. And it's just this wonderful way of getting to the bottom of why those triggers are triggering you, and what that means and what the lesson is in that for you.
I've definitely heard about the work before, and I've heard it's very much worth doing. So my question
It's
on that,
amazing.
in being curious, is now that you've done the work and you've written the
Yep.
book rock bottom, uh, and you help people with resilience, are you fully resilient?
No, absolutely not.
So how does the I thought that'd be the answer. So thank you for answering it like that. So how does the practice then develop? Is it something that you just omnipresently aware of, or are you taking stock every few months to just say how does that going,
Yeah.
or
Oh,
how do you approach it?
it's more than it's every day, like it's every minute. It's resilience is definitely a journey, not a destination, and it is just a matter of literally continually doing the work. Continually having that curiosity, and chasing up that curiosity with some brutal honesty. And so it's that ability to say, hey, what's going on there, and then be really honest with yourself about what is really going on there, and on a really consistent basis. And so that might look like some really brutal sort of introspection. That might look, and brutal is not the right word, because it's really loving introspection, right? But it really honest is probably the better word for it, right? Or it might be a really honest conversation with a work colleague. It might be a really honest conversation with your partner. It's about saying, these difficult things are worth doing. A, because they build my resilience every time I do them, and B, because they help me get into a more resilient place. It's the things that we shove under the carpet that are what causes us the problems when we have a year like 2020 and 2021. The more we can bring those out of the open and just consistently do that on a day by day basis, then the more of those little chinks we've dealt with, the more resilient we are, the more potential we have to thrive when the next challenge comes along.
Love it. So on that note, what is the potential for communities and humanity if everyone worked on their resilience? as we move forward through this year?
Well, I think the potential is like literally like peace and harmony and love in the world. Like that sounds like the most hippie answer that I never thought I would give. But I think that is actually the answer, right? Because if we've all dealt with our triggers, right? Because ultimately, like you think about it, like world wars get caused by triggers. Like people get triggered about stuff, you know? And so if we'd all dealt with our triggers and we were all, because at the moment when everyone's, when people aren't resilient, they're kind of like loaded guns walking around, right? They've got these triggers just waiting to be poked and prodded. They've been shoving it under the carpet for the last decade, and one day it's just going to go, and we have like a society of people walking around like that. I mean, just spend half an hour on Facebook and you'll find them all. And so we just have this, at the moment, it's like people just have so much built up, pent up frustration that I think if we could all be in the place where we've actually done the work and dealt with those triggers, then you're going to have a lot more, a much happier, more harmonious existence on a person-to-person level, but then on a family level, then on a community level, and then ultimately on a worldwide level. So I've actually never really thought of it that way, and you asked that question, to be perfectly honest, but that's my answer.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So I want more people to be able to work on their resilience, because that answer just resonates with me, and I'm sure it resonates with everybody who's listening. So where can people find out more about you, Brett? Where can they get hold of your book, and what can they do to really start working on their resilience right now? Brett, that was an amazing answer, and you know what? It really, really resonated with me, and that's the kind of vision that I'd love to see in the world. And I think people listening right now, it's the kind of thing they want to see, especially with what's going on. So for those who want to get more resilience, who want to work on themselves, how can they find out more about you? Where can they get a copy of your book so they can start doing some of that work right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can find out more about me at drbretthill.com, which is my website. And they can get the book at rockbottombook.com.au. And so, they can get all the details there. And they can also, I do some resilience mentoring as well. So if they want to find out about the resilience mentoring, they find out all about that on my website as well, or they can go to exercisingresilience.com and find it there too.
Perfect. Well, I know people are going to do that and jump straight at that opportunity. Dr. Brett, thank you ever so much for being on the show today. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm going to go and put some of that into practice, and I know that all of our listeners are as well. As soon as I can get on the plane and come out to Australia, it'd be a pleasure to jump in and come and see you. I know you can't just nip around the corner to see someone over there, but we'll see if we can make that happen as well. So thank you very much for being on the show today. It's an absolute pleasure. We really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, mate. Yeah, the door's always open here. So whenever you want to come for a visit and maybe come down for the Ashes, more than welcome, mate.
When we're winning, I'll come down. Thanks for joining us, Brett. I appreciate that.
Thanks, mate.